Special Third Special Judge of Lincoln County is now sitting. Be seated.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The court calls the case regarding the May 11, 2010 primary election contest, Democratic nomination for office of clerk of the Circuit Court of Lincoln County, West Virginia, Charles Brumfield, contestant. This is civil action number 10-C-075. The record should reflect that Charles Brumfield does appear in person, and he is represented by counsel Harvey Payton. The record should further reflect that Jerry Bowman appears in person. He is the respondent, and he is represented by Mike Carey and David Pogue. We are here scheduled to complete this matter, to conduct a trial. I understand that counsel have conferred, and in fact they have conferred for a lengthy period of time, and that perhaps there is some resolution of this matter. I'll call upon counsel to make a statement, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mike Carey on behalf of the respondent, Gary Bowman. As I advised the court earlier this morning, my client was in a position where he financially could not continue to defend all the allegations, or at least the lengthy allegations that which have resulted in a 5-day trial. We have reviewed the evidence with Mr. Payton on behalf of the contestant, and have determined that should the court review all the evidence, that the court would be in a position to make certain findings that there were some imperfections associated with certain of the ballots, that due to certain confusing statutes and other requirements that made it unclear as to the exact requirements of the application process. We agreed that the court would be able to determine that there were 207 ballots that did not appear to be in the entire handwriting of the applicant. The statute is not clear on that requirement. It does not appear in one section of the statute, but it appears actually to say that the application shall be submitted on a form approved by the Secretary of State. That form does not specify that it has to be filled out in the applicant's own handwriting. In fact, the statute itself in another section simply says that the application shall be completed and signed by the person in his own handwriting. So it could be argued that, in fact, the handwriting only limits the signature. But because we're not in a position at this point to litigate the matter, Your Honor, for purposes of this hearing, we agree that that should have constituted at least a challenge ballot by the clerk. Similarly, that when a person submits an application for absentee ballot and identifies personal or business travel as the reason, they are to list an address. Now, it's not clear why that's so, because the application is usually submitted well before the 20 days preceding the election, and so in most cases the person's home address should suffice. But the statute says an alternative address shall be placed on the form, and because of that, that is subject to being challenged as well. Similarly, Your Honor, there is some confusion as to whether merely employment on the day of the election or the date of all prior early voting days, which is required by the statute, but in a directive issued by or published in the Lincoln County Journal submitted by the Secretary of State, indicates that simply unavailability on the day of the election employment would be sufficient. So because of all those ballots, it could be challenged for those above reasons. The parties have simply agreed that Mr. Bowman won't contest or won't challenge Mr. Brumfield's contest in the election, and agrees that 309 of the ballots cast in his favor would not be counted, thereby determining that Mr. Brumfield to be the winner of the election. It is further agreed by the parties, Your Honor, that both sides are to bear their costs, subject to any other avenue for recovery, but not against each other in this matter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carey. Mr. Payton.
What Mr. Carey has said is accurate, Your Honor. I would tell the court that what we're going to proceed on today, we do have as exhibits 207 applications for absentee ballot that appear not to have been completed entirely in the handwriting of the voter. What Mr. Carey mentioned specifically, West Virginia Code 3, Chapter 3, Article 3, Section 2A, which talks about a person authorized and desiring to vote a mail-in absentee ballot in any primary election is to make application in writing in the proper form as follows. It talks about getting a form that you need to download off the internet or have mailed to you by the Secretary of State. Makes no reference to the necessity that the thing be completed entirely in the voter's handwriting. Unfortunately, in a later section, that's Code Chapter 3, Article 3, Section 5A, it says the voter shall complete the application in his or her own handwriting. Contradiction within the same article. With regard to the requirement for an out-of-county address, even though clearly it seems that what Mr. Carey says would be accurate, and one would assume the best place to get an absentee ballot would be at your home, since you can apply for an absentee ballot as much as 84 days before the election. And the ballots have to be produced in the hands of the clerk 42 days before the election. But early voting starts in a much shorter period. But it is mandated. It says that the clerk will check that the applications and there should be an out-county address. If there's not, then a notice of challenge should be sent. Unfortunately, in this case, there were some fairly apparent deficiencies in these applications, and no notices of challenge were sent that we're aware of. And that complicates the matter because then you've got these ballot call code manual. With regard to the application and the issues of travel and of employment, we think it is significant and in support of the agreement that we're stating here today is that if you look, here's one of the applications, which is captioned West Virginia absentee ballot application by mail or fax, not be submitted earlier than 84 days prior to the election, which this is. And it says, by requesting an absentee ballot for the following reasons, I'm not able to vote in person during the early voting period for election day because. There's another form, application for voting absentee ballot by mail, published by Castone Harris. I'm not able to vote in person during the 20 days prior to the election and on election day because. And those two are contradictory. The early voting period is not necessarily defined by the 20 days. And then it says personal business or travel, with no reference to the inability to be in the county or the fact you're completely out of the county. And then it says employment.